Hello there guys, and welcome to the first video in a series of videos that I am doing called Power Rangers What If? In these video series, I am going to go over all sorts of interesting alternate scenarios that could have happened in Power Rangers, such as if they had decided to make things very differently than what they ended up making them. For this video, I am going to be discussing about what could have happened if Choujin Sentai Jetman was adapted as Season 1 of Power Rangers. If you happen to be a fan of Power Rangers, but you've never heard of Jetman, I'll go ahead and explain it. Jetman was the 15th season of the Super Sentai series in Japan that Power Rangers was based upon. It happened to be the very last season of Super Sentai to come out before Power Rangers even happened. You see, after Jetman had come out in Japan, the next series was Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, which was what Season 1 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was adapted from. Now, it just so happened that Haim Saban, the original creator of Power Rangers, had an interest in adapting Jetman as the first season of Power Rangers before eventually deciding on Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger. I'm not quite sure what the whole process was with why he chose to adapt Zyuranger instead of Jetman, although some could probably say it may have just been because Jurassic Park was coming out around that time and he wanted to bring out dinosaurs as he figured that would be very possible. And considering that any time Super Sentai brings out a dinosaur-themed Sentai, they pretty much proceed to adapt it, despite the fact that the most recent issue has had multiple different options, which quite frankly should have been picked, especially a certain other one that has more Rangers than ever before. But I'm not going to discuss about that in this video. So, why don't we take a look at what Jetman would have brought us? Well, for starters, if Jetman was the first season to be adapted, this would pretty much mean that the first color combination that we would have gotten would be red, black, yellow, blue, and white, which is a color combination that we have only seen 2 times in Power Rangers, which would be with Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers and Power Rangers Wild Force. Now, you could also argue that Dino Thunder also did this, since there were only 5 Rangers that were introduced in that season, although Trent is pretty much more considered a 6th Ranger than a core team member. And also, his Sentai counterpart in Abba Ranger was officially counted as the 6th Ranger of that series as well, which technically would be correct considering that there was a 5th Abba Ranger, not counting him, but it was just a wannabe Ranger. And this Ranger wasn't adapted into Dino Thunder, so yeah. But in any case, I pretty much would see Trent as the 6th Ranger of Dino Thunder, pretty much saying that he's the quote-unquote 6th Ranger, which means that he is treated as the 6th Ranger, even if he is not officially introduced as the 6th. Getting back to Jetman, this would pretty much mean that we would have a color combination that would hardly be seen in future seasons. Now, of course, with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the 5 Ranger color combination was red, black, blue, yellow, and pink, which after Mighty Morphin, we've only seen that occur 3 more times. 4 if you count Hyperforce, but that's not a full series, and I personally would not count it. If you count it though, that's okay. Besides that, the way that the genders for each of the Rangers would also be quite different, considering that later seasons would have it be much different. Now, in Power Rangers, there has to date been 2 Blue Rangers who had been female. These would include Tori from Ninja Storm, and I can't remember her name, but I'll put her name up on the screen right now, who appeared as the Blue Ranger for Mystic Force. And as for a male Yellow Ranger, the only times in which we've ever seen a male Yellow Ranger would be Tydeus from Alien Rangers, Dustin from Ninja Storm, Chip from Mystic Force, and Calvin in Ninja Steel. If Kyuranger had been adapted already, we would have had our 5th male Yellow Ranger. Why, Hasbro? Why? However, if Jetman was the first season to be adapted instead of Zyuranger, This would pretty much mean that we would have gotten our first male Yellow Ranger in the very first series. And he would have been the first Yellow Ranger overall, male or female. However, he would only have 4 more male predecessors after this, as most Yellow Rangers after this season would be female. That is, unless they had chosen to make a different color Ranger be female instead of the Yellow Ranger. Like, if they then decided to adapt Zyuranger, they could make Tricera Ranger be a female instead of Tiger Ranger. But, I'm not quite sure what they could have done if it had happened this way. And yeah, we would also get a female Blue Ranger for the first season of Power Rangers. And that would be quite interesting, how we wouldn't get very many female blues after the first season. Certainly quite odd how you start a season with a female Blue Ranger, but then most seasons after that, the Blue Ranger would be male. I guess kind of the same thing, considering how Tommy was the first ever Green Ranger, but while he was the 6th Ranger of the team, most Green Rangers that came out after him were part of the core team. The only exception to this would, of course, be Cam from Ninja Storm, and also the Elephant Spirit Ranger from Jungle Fury. And we would also be getting our first White Ranger in this series, and our first White Ranger would have been female at this point. Now, of course, white happens to be a very gender-interchangeable color in both Power Rangers and Super Sentai, just as the color yellow is. We started out with Tommy being the first White Ranger, and he was male. Then we got Delphine, who was the first female White Ranger. And pretty much it just goes back and forth between male and female for the subsequent series. Now, what about the villains? Well, as we have seen with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the villain footage was pretty much redubbed from the original Zyuranger footage. Although I did check online and find out that some of the villain footage in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers happened to have been newly recorded footage that was used only in Power Rangers, which many fans refer to as Ju 1.5, which is pretty much the first instance in which some new Japanese footage would be filmed to be used only in Power Rangers. This was done in order to get the lip sync movements to match with Rita Repulsa and Scorpina, since they happen to be played by face actors. And by that I mean actors who portray human-like characters, rather than having a full bodysuit costume that completely seals their face. So, pretty much, as you can imagine, adapting Rita and Scorpina was pretty much a hard process, considering that they didn't have the same actors in the US. In fact, there was only one episode of Mighty Morphin in which we did see Scorpina be played by an American actress. However, because they could only keep said actress for one episode, we never saw Scorpina again after that. Although with Rita, they were able to get a permanent American actor for Rita so that she could still continue to appear in future episodes. They just needed to give some explanation as to why she looked different. How do you think that would have gone if they went with Jetman? Would they just use villain footage that was re-recorded, like redub the footage of the villains from Jetman? And when they needed to film new footage, how do you think that would work out? In fact, out of all of the main villains from Jetman, Gray is the only one who is not human, or human-like, depending on how you look at it. All of the others happen to be face characters. Although the main villain, whose name I probably will butcher if I try to say it now, but I'll put his name up on the screen, so just in case you don't know what his name is, the name on the screen will tell you. That, I think he could have easily been adapted, because most of his face is covered, so you probably would not be able to tell that he would be played by a different actor anytime he makes an appearance in US footage. Or do you think they would have actually brought in their own sets of villains right from the beginning? Similar to how Lord Zed marked the debut of the very first US exclusive villain. but he was just one villain rather than a whole group of villains. They pretty much ended up not using any of the villains from Zyuranger by just reusing the same villains that were carried over from Zyuranger, along with bringing in one villain of their own. As far as the Rangers and what abilities they would have and what color they would be, Jason and Zack, of course, would still be red and black respectfully, but Billy and Trini would need to be switched since we have a male Yellow Ranger and a female Blue Ranger, so Billy would have been yellow and Trini would have been blue. And of course, Kimberly would have been white since Jetman didn't have a pink ranger, they had a white ranger. And I bet you are wondering, what about Tommy? How would he have been implanted if Jetman was adapted first? I guess you could probably say that he could have been adapted as Birdman, although Birdman only appeared for one episode, two if you want to argue, but he didn't morph until the second episode of the story arc. And he only appeared for a short time, and then he gets killed off. Now granted, Tommy's counterpart in Zyuranger, Barai, was also killed off, but he appeared more often in comparison to Birdman from Jetman. So, how do you think Tommy could have been portrayed? And I did also read up that if Jetman was adapted first, they would have then adapted Zyuranger for the second season. And how exactly would that work? Would they have used the same suits from Zyuranger if they had done this? Or would they keep using the Jetman suits, just as how when Season 2 of Power Rangers came out, we began using the Zyuranger footage, but we still used the Zyuranger suits for the main team, and only Tommy got a suit switch out that season. Do you think Tommy could have been introduced if they had adapted Zyuranger as Season 2? And maybe have him be the only one to have a suit that came from Zyuranger? And if that happened to be the case, and fans years later had come onto the internet and discovered the Super Sentai series, they would certainly be quite surprised to discover how they discovered the source material for the second season of Power Rangers and see that the suits happen to look exactly like the 6th Ranger suits did. Since Season 2 of Power Rangers, if Jetman was adapted first and they brought Zyuranger in as Season 2, and only the Dragon Ranger suit was carried over, they would certainly be quite surprised to notice the similarities that these suits have compared to the Dragon Ranger suit. Now, of course, that happened to also be the case with Zyuranger, in which only Keeper Ranger was adapted, and the core Zyuranger suits were not brought in, at least for the time being. So what do you think? Do you think Jetman would have done well if it was adapted first? Or are you happy that Zyuranger was adapted first? Personally, while I do think that it would be pretty interesting to see what this would have been like, I think that Haim Saban made a good choice on adapting Zyuranger first. Sure, Jetman could have been a good season of Power Rangers as well, but for what it is, it's a pretty good season. So that is it for my theory video about what would have happened if Jetman was adapted as Season 1 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Join me next time when I go over the possibility of what could have happened if Jetman was adapted as Season 5 of Power Rangers. Hey there guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you want to see more videos from me, click on any of the video links that show up on the screen. And also feel free to subscribe to my channel, and if you can, share this video on all your social media if you can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.